Hello again, welcome back to Asgard, and welcome to a new tutorial, one that I had promised to make a bit back because it is a very crucial part of the beginning of Tales, and as a heads up, we are going to be doing some other tutorials like this that have been requested, things like Thaumcraft and stuff that I think there's probably not a ton of really in-depth tutorials, so we will be covering some other mods because you guys seem to enjoy these. But today we're going to be covering Pyrotech. Pyrotech is a mod that is, if you're not familiar with it, it's very similar to a lot of kind of those mods that are in the same vein as like Terraformacraft, where you have a much harder start that's a lot more involved, but it does like lengthen the beginning parts of Minecraft, which tend to be some of the most fun parts of Minecraft. It does lengthen those out and adds new mechanics and ways to go about the beginning stages of a Minecraft experience. And out of all the Terraformacraft type mods like that, Pyrotech is my personal favorite. I absolutely love it. It's not exactly like some of the others because I know some of the others you're not able to punch wood. However, with Pyrotech you can still punch wood. That is still enabled by default. And of course everything that we're going to be covering today is just default Pyrotech. In Tales it's a little bit different, and depending on your pack it may be a little bit different. But as you're exploring, on your first day, you're going to notice these rocks here. And depending on your biome and your area and stuff like that, there's going to be different types of rocks. You can find regular stone, granite, diorite, andesite, sandstone, limestone. There's a good variety of these, and they are pretty much interchangeable. And if you break these off, you're going to get stone rocks or limestone rocks or, whatever the case may be. And if you shift right click, you can place these back down, and you will notice that they do kind of have different, I think it's block by block. So if I come over here, yeah, that changes up the texture here. Come over here, it changes it up. So you're going to have these that you can kind of use for decor, which I do really appreciate. And in addition, they are key to your initial crafting. When you're first starting out, you're going to be looking for these rocks. You're also going to be breaking some grass and collecting plant fibers or dried plant fibers. As you saw, I just got one of those, but they can be somewhat rare. You're generally going to be getting just regular plant fibers. These are dried out versions, and we're going to be talking about how to make those. But if you do get your hands on a bit of these, you can kind of bypass some of the initial crafting that you'll have to do. So you're going to want some plant fibers, you're going to want some rocks, and you're also going to want to break some leaves to find yourself some sticks. These can drop from tree leaves and stuff like that. So once you have a bit of these, let me get one more rock. Once you have a bit of these, you can make your very first tools. And tools are crafted like so. That's going to make a crude axe. You can also make a crude hoe, like so, a crude pickaxe, a crude shovel, and as well as a crude fishing rod. Fishing rod's a little bit more involved because you do require string or twine. We're going to talk a little bit more about twine here in a minute. But you're going to make your starting tools. Now, with default Pyrotech, your wooden axes, your wooden pickaxes, those are disabled. However, wooden swords are still craftable. Just basically the crude stuff replaces the wooden tool equivalent, right? You're not going to be able to make wooden hoes, wooden pickaxes, wooden shovels, wooden axes. So you're going to want to make your crude tools. As far as stone goes, once you make your pick, you can't move straight into a normal stone pickaxe because it does require masonry bricks, which we're going to talk a little bit about. They're a little bit later on. So at the bare minimum, what you're going to want to make is you're going to want to get yourself at least a crude hammer and a crude axe. Though a crude pick would be useful in order to kind of push forward and actually be able to craft larger things than just a 2x2. And what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to make yourself a chopping block. This just requires, you can use a crude axe with with your log to craft yourself a chopping block, and then you can just place this down, and then you can take your wood and you can place that onto there, right? And then you're going to take your axe and just hold right click, and it's going to cut it down into a plank. Now if you want to make a slab, because you're going to need to make a slab to make the work table, which requires a slab and a piece of wood, you're just going to place your plank down, you're going to hold right click, and you're going to cut it down into a slab. Now you'll notice that right now this is very wasteful. I'm only getting one slab per plank, and I'm only getting 1 plank per wood. Once you progress to higher tier axes, so for example, if we have an obsidian axe and we put a oak wood log down on there, we hold right click, you notice we get 3 oak wood planks, with the obsidian axe. So depending on the quality of your axe, you're going to get better output. The same is true with slabs as well, but there is better ways to cut wood later on. So once you get your slab, you're going to be able to make a work table. So the work table, super useful. You can see it does say condition good because this will break over time. But it is a little bit of a push to get up to this crafting table, right? The iron block is a bit more involved within Pyrotech than just getting some iron, throwing it in a furnace, and being done with it. Now this work table, you can store items down here. As you can see, you can store 3 items down here. Just kind of a storage, and then this is your crafting table. Also, I do want to mention, if you're playing with like default Pyrotech, you're going to start out with a Pyrotechnic Esoterica. If you don't, you can cook this on a campfire. We're going to talk a little bit more about the campfire in just a moment, but you can cook a regular book to get this. And this only is going to show up if you have patchouli installed. It's not required by Pyrotech, but you're not going to have a book, a kind of tutorial book here if you don't have patchouli. So this is going to tell you, how to do everything within the mod. But at this point, you can kind of start pushing into other things, right? You can craft more involved things. One thing I would suggest making is a crude drying rack or a regular drying rack if you have the stuff available. It is a little bit more involved. But the crude drying rack is just sticks and plant fibers, whereas the drying rack requires that you have sticks, and you have to get either twine, durable twine, string, and a ladder, which of course you're going to need your crafting table to craft that. I'll show you how to craft things on this table. Since we've got it pulled up right here, you're just going to place out your stuff. This will make a ladder. Then you're going to take your hammer, just hold right click, and there you go. You've crafted a ladder. So the outputs and stuff are the same as using a regular crafting table. It's just a little bit more involved, and the condition on the work table and the durability of the hammer is going to decrease. So you will have to remake those from time to time. Now let's talk about the drying racks and how drying works. So, we talked about the dried plant fibers. These things are really useful, and you're going to be using these extensively for making things like twine and tinder, pit kilns, straw, fiber torches, flint and tinder, quite a bit. And a lot of this stuff kind of builds upon itself. So twine is then used to make a variety of shears, bags, also durable twine. So I do suggest that you get a pretty decent drying system in place pretty quick. And the crude drying rack, you just place this up on the wall, and then you can place plant fibers down. You can see it says speed is 100%, and it shows that arrow there is going to fill up with progress as it dries. Now by default, at just 100% speed, this is going to take about, I think, 4 or 5 minutes. I know it's tweaked a little bit in tails, not to be shorter though. It's still really long. But if you're just going with that 100% speed, it's not going to be super fast. Now the drying rack, the speeds on this are the exact same, but the difference is you can place up to 4 items per drying rack. So it is a pretty slow process. Pyrotech tends to have very long crafts, like 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes long crafts per item. Pyrotech is designed to be expanded upon. You don't want just one drying rack. That's a horrible idea. You don't want just one soaking pot. You don't want just one kiln. You don't want just one of anything within Pyrotech. But Pyrotech also features a variety of ways to speed up your crafting, your machines. I'm using that term very, very loosely. I mean, a drying rack's not a machine, but your stuff that crafts things, there's a variety of ways to speed that up. So we're going to talk about those in just a minute, and as we talk about all these different machines and different crafting mechanics, we'll talk about some of the ways that they can be sped up. But regardless, you're still going to want a lot of things. Don't just rest on your laurels and craft 1 or 2 drying racks and say, okay, I'm done with Pyrotech. That's one thing I love about it. Now the drying rack, once you move up to this one, it's not super expensive. It can be crafted. Even if you can't find dried plant fibers to make that twine, or you can't find string or something like that, you can make a few of these, let them dry out the plant fibers, make your twine, and pretty quickly move over to the drying rack, which I do suggest that you do. And now you can see right here the speed is 135% on this right now, and by comparison a drying rack in the same spot 100%. So you're going to get a little bit of a speed increase. The reason being, of course, if you ever dried things, you know that if air can flow around and underneath and kind of on all sides, it's going to dry faster. So instead of it being just kind of hung on the wall here, it's actually got space where air can flow around the item. And you can place up to 4 items per drying rack. So they're going to be a little bit faster by default as far as drying things. Now, as far as speeding this whole process up, if you look inside your Pyrotech Esoterica and plant fibers dried, you can see details. Yeah, it's 8 minutes on a drying rack by default, 8 minutes on a crude, and then of course just 2 minutes here, which we're going to talk about that. But if you look at the drying rack, you can see that right here the performance of a drying rack depends on several factors. You're going to be looking at proximity to a campfire. Also just any kind of heat source, not necessarily just a campfire. I've noticed other heat sources work fine. Also exposure to the sky, the time of day, the biome temperature and humidity. So if you're in a desert, this is going to dry a whole lot faster than just in a plains biome. And on the reverse, if you are in kind of a cold biome, it's going to dry a whole lot slower. You're going to be looking at probably, maybe 50-60% speed instead of 100% speed. Also exposure to the rain and the rain in the biome. So there's a lot of ways to kind of, speed this up. If you're in a desert, it's a great place to dry things, of course. And if you put fire around it and things like that, it's going to speed it up. Now, as far as making a campfire, I want to talk about that real quick. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to make yourself some tinder. This right here, this is just dried plant fibers and sticks. So once again, you can get those dried plant fibers from just breaking these, but it is a pretty low chance. I just got 2 from there, which is pretty good. And I've also found that tends to be pretty biome specific. So if you're in a really cold biome or a really wet biome like a swamp, you're breaking grass, you're probably not going to find any dried plant fibers. If you're in a desert, you're going to find them a lot more, right? So depending on your biome, you can get away without having to maybe dry as much initially. But once you have that, and once you craft yourself some tinder, what you can do is you can take this, just right click it onto the ground, and it's going to start building what's called a campfire. And what you can do is you can get yourself some logs, once again by punching wood or using your crude axe. You can get yourself some logs and you can place these out. And this is probably one of my favorite campfires, right? It just looks so good. That's one thing about Pyrotech. I don't know, it's just so much attention to detail. I absolutely love this mod. Now, once you have your campfire built, you're going to have to start a fire. Okay? Now, initially, you're going to be kind of limited on what kind of fire starting devices that you may have access to. Flint and steel is a little bit more involved to get to. But there's a couple different options. If you have access to string, you can make yourself a bow drill. It is going to require a bow. You also may find skeletons or something, maybe get a bow some other way. But you are going to have to get a bow for that one. But it does have 32 durability. It can be used to make quite a few fires. And for example, you just hold right click with this and it starts a fire. Now another option is the flint and tinder. This requires those dried plant fibers, rock of any kind, and you're going to need a flint shard. Now flint shards are also used for making the flint pickaxes, which are basically, or the flint tools I should say. And there's also the flint hammer and stuff. These are basically upgraded tools with a lot more durability than the crude stuff. If you have access to bones, you can also make a bone version, which is equivalent in quality and durability and everything, but it's a little bit more. We're going to have to get up to an anvil, which we're going to talk a little bit about. But what you can do, you can get flint shards by breaking these down on the anvil, which we're going to talk about alongside the bones. But another way that you can get it is making yourself a shovel. Crude shovel would be fine for starting out, and then you're going to have to go out and find yourself some gravel. So I'm going to place a little bit of that out, and then of course just start breaking the gravel. You're going to get, as you notice, a variety of rocks when you break gravel with a crude shovel. But you will see some flint shards dropping as well. You're going to get those. You're going to make your flint and tinder. And then what you can do is start your fire. Just hold right click. There we go. And it's going to start burning. You can see we have a burn time of a little over 16 minutes with this. And you'll notice that the speed on the drying racks goes up. So the crude drying rack is now 120% speed. The standard drying rack is up to 162 speed. And if we were to start a fire here, you can see that goes up to 189. That stays at 120 because it's still pretty far from that. It's not going to get much benefit from this fire way over here. Which, if you have access to some kind of ever-burning block like netherrack or something like that, that's great for this. Though initially you're probably not going to have access to something like that. But any kind of fire around this will be good. And there is ways to make it a little bit easier and even do some kind of cool automation type setups as we move forward with Pyrotech. You can see this has now burnt out a log from the campfire. Now what you can do is you can take more logs and add them to it and add more burn time to this fire. So you can keep your campfires burning indefinitely, right? Like if you've ever went out camping in real life, like kind of like primitive camping, you really don't want your fire to go out, right? So you try to add logs and keep wood on there to keep it burning, and you can do that within Pyrotech. So you can see now it's back up to about 18 minutes of burn time on this campfire, and I can keep adding logs. Just gather wood every day, come back to your campfire at night, and kind of keep it burning. Now one thing to note is if it does rain or your campfire gets wet, it is going to extinguish the fire. So maybe building this in somewhat of a covered area is not a bad idea. Now what's really nice is while you're out exploring, maybe you kill a cow or something like that. You bring it back. You don't have a furnace right now. You cannot craft it at the moment. As you can see, it requires iron ingots, fire charges, stone. There's a lot of recipe changes with Pyrotech, of course, related to the initial stages of starting Minecraft. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your food and you're going to place it onto your campfire, and it's going to cook it. And you're going to want to keep an eye on it. You can see that arrow is starting to fill up. If you let it overcook, it will burn the food. So just bear that in mind. You kind of want to keep an eye on it. It's a little bit more realistic in that fact. And if you do let your food burn, you are going to get burned food, which is not, it's not very good for eating. There are a few added recipes here. You can make things like baked apples by cooking them over a fire. You can make roasted carrots. You can roast eggs, brown and red mushrooms, beetroots. So there's a few new food types that are available to you. And with the standard campfire, it's just going to be one food item at a time. So it is pretty slow, but there are ways to cook a lot more and a lot quicker in some of the later stages of Pyrotech. And you can see right there we have a steak, and if we leave it on there just a bit too long, it will burn it, as you can see there. So we have now burnt that. It takes about 15-20 seconds of overcooking something, and then it will just burn it. And one thing I do want to mention, which I almost forgot to mention, as your campfire burns, it will inevitably create a lot of ash, as you can see right there, as it's kind of steadily piling up around the campfire. Now, what you're going to want to do is just get yourself a shovel, right-click this, and you can pull the ash from the campfire and just kind of clean that up and get yourself some Pyrotech ash, which will be useful for some other stuff later on. So do hold on to this because you'll be using it a bit. Now, let's say for a moment that you want to light up a cave or the area around your base. What you're going to want to do, initially you're not going to be able to make torches. Now, by default, if you take a look at the recipe for torches, it doesn't sound that bad. It's just coal, stick, makes 4. However, if you have, let's grab ourselves some coal ore. If you find this underground, normally you'd mine it and you get coal. But within Pyrotech, you're going to get coal pieces. Okay, these coal pieces can be used to make stone torches, which we're going to talk a little bit more about later on, because they do require those masonry bricks. To actually make coal like you're used to, you're going to have to get into compacting within the mechanical compactor, which we'll talk about later, and then you're going to have to break that down into coal. So initially you're not going to be able to make torches for a pretty good while within default Pyrotech. So what you're going to want to start out doing is making fiber torches. These require dried plant fibers and sticks for each torch. And if you place these down and you take some kind of a fire lighting device, you light these, and there you go. You have a torch. Okay. Now this thing does not last forever. It's going to burn up over time and the torch will be gone. And if it rains on it, it's going to get extinguished. So initially it's a little bit more effort to kind of light stuff up. And you do take burn damage from these things, so just bear that in mind. But initially lighting up stuff is going to be a little bit more involved to do. So try to keep them covered, and they will go out over time. There's nothing that you can do to avoid that until you get to the stone torches, which will last forever but are still extinguished by rain. Now standard torches are not extinguished by rain within Pyrotech. So once you get up to making, standard torches or just another mod's torches, then you're free from that rain extinguish effect, as well as them burning up. That won't ever happen anymore. Now also I want to mention buckets. There are a variety of buckets. The only one that you can craft right at the gate is the wooden bucket, which just requires planks and plant fibers. This is not going to be able to handle hot fluids, and in addition, if we come over and we grab ourselves a bucket of water, you're going to see that there's going to be a durability bar that starts running down on the wooden bucket. And there we go. It's now broken. So they're very, very limited. You're only going to be able to move fluids very, very short distances with it. About 8 seconds. So however far you can get in about 8 seconds is all you're going to be able to move it using those wooden buckets, right? Until we get up to the clay bucket and start firing clay. But the other thing that I want to talk about this episode, just kind of covering the basics of starting out with Pyrotech this episode, I want to talk about storage, because it is inevitable in the world of Minecraft, especially modded Minecraft. There's just tons and tons of stuff, right? So initially with Pyrotech, to make a chest, you're going to require iron ingots. So it's not something, unless you get lucky, once again, you can bypass a lot of this with exploration. You may find some iron in a chest somewhere, and you can get a chest that way. It's not too limiting in that regard, so you can still explore and bypass some of that. But until you get to the point where you found some iron, if you want to store stuff up, Pyrotech offers a few different things here. It adds shelves, which are crafted like so. We've got stashes, we've got crates, and we've got wood racks. Okay. And personally, I like these more than a chest, especially once you get to the durable versions. They just look a little bit better. So what we can do is we can place these out. That's a shelf, and you can see that you can place items on each shelf, 3 items per shelf for a total of 9 items stored per shelf block. Now there is the stash. This works a little bit different, whereas the shelf stores single items, and it will store like a full stack of gravel in one slot. And then, there's some oak wood, and you can see up there what is stored in each slot. And to pull it off, just right click it and it's going to pull it out of the shelf. Now the stash works a little bit different in that you place a certain item, let's say oak wood, and let me grab a bit more oak wood, take it over here, place it in. Now we're up to 120. So kind of like a drawer, or a Java barrel or something like that. A stash is going to store large amounts of one item. And it's kind of nice because it does render it. I absolutely love these. Pyrotech just in general, it's just a beautiful mod to work with and do things with, and it actually makes for some really cool decoration. Now if you have something like oxide daisies, you place these in, look at that, they show up all nice. You can use, like, for example, saplings. You can place those in there. They render. Stashes are just a lot of fun, and they do make for some really cool storage and even decor in your storage area, which is quite nice. Now, next up, you have crates, and these are kind of like shelves in that you can place items into them from the top. And so you can place in, say, like 9 items, kind of like, you know, over there. So, and it'll hold up to a stack of those. So it's just basically a horizontal storage option as opposed to the shelf where you have things stored, kind of like a crate would have things stored, right? So just kind of a visual alternative to just the standard shelf. Now the last thing that we have is the wood rack. This, you're going to want to keep this near your campfires probably, and the purpose of this is you can store, let me fill up my campfire here, you can store logs, and they're going to look pretty cool. And for example, let's put some oak down right there, let's put some spruce in the middle, let's toss a piece of jungle. So as you can see, you could store a stack in each slot, and it does have 9 slots available, so I can put in, you know, some oak, some birch, and we could throw in, you know, a little bit more on top here. And there we go. And if you look at it, you could see all the different types of wood that we have in it. Now, if you right click, it's going to take a block from, you know, the bottom, and it's going to move all the other blocks down, which I think is really, really cool. And it's just a really neat system. Visually, very, very pleasing mod, but a neat little system for storing your wood and kind of having it near your campfire so you can quickly refill it. So if you ever want to kind of replicate that really, really kind of like primitive sort of survival feeling, I think Pyrotech fits that bill perfectly. It's visually pleasing and has just a lot of really neat mechanics, and then it also has machines, which we're going to talk about in a couple episodes, how all these machines work and stuff, which gets really, really fun. I absolutely love Pyrotech for pretty much every feature that it has. It's a really, really cool mod. Now the other thing I want to talk about is the rock bag. Now to get this, you are going to need some wool, some twine, a stash, and you're going to have to get some leather, which of course, I know it's showing fey leather, it's because I have roots in here. But you're going to have to get some leather as well, any kind of leather, you know, from killing mobs. Now to get wool, of course, you could go out and kill sheep, but you could also at this point make flint shears using just some twine and some flint shards to make yourself some flint shears, so you can clip that wool off and not kill your sheep if they're near your base and you're wanting to keep them alive. And what the rock bag does is there's a lot of different sources for rocks, right? Like we talked about gravel. It drops rocks, as you can see. You're going to get better output, of course, with a shovel, but you can break these by hand. You're going to get a variety of rocks from the gravel. It's not going to drop the gravel block, but you can still craft gravel blocks later, and we're going to talk about that. But also picking rocks up on the ground, also mining certain ores drops rocks. There's just a lot of different rocks that you're going to be coming across while you're out exploring. With the rock bag, just shift right click and set it to the open state, and that means it's going to pick things up. So if we're out and we're exploring, you can see that the rocks didn't go into my inventory, and you can see that the capacity on the rock bag has gone up. We have 5 andesite rocks, 5 diorite, and 6 granite rocks. And what we can do is we can right click on the ground, set that down, and we can pull those rocks out of there or replace them back into the bag with it open like that. Shift right click to close it, and we can pick it back up, you know. If it's closed, of course, it's not going to accept rocks. Now, in addition, of course, you can leave one of these rock bags over at your base and use that to store rocks, you know, kind of in mass at your base, which is kind of nice. Now, in addition to just being able to place it in the world and kind of interact with it and do things, there's some other really neat features. So, for example, let's grab some stone rocks, and if we throw these down and we run over them, you'll notice that it goes into here instead of the bag. So if you have any unfilled slots in your inventory that have rocks, it's going to fill those, prioritize filling those over putting them into the bag. But if you don't have any, they're going to automatically go into the bag. Let me grab a chest here. If we come over to the chest or any kind of thing that stores like an inventory and we shift right click with the open bag, it dumps all the rocks into that inventory. If you shift right click on just a block, it's just going to dump them out into the world. Also, if you're up to the point where you have hoppers or some kind of automation and you want to automate this in some weird sort of fashion, you can place it down and it will pull from our rock bag. So kind of a neat little thing, I guess, that you may have some uses for. And another really nice thing is if you have a bag and it's filled and you just want to put it away, it will go into the crates and will still have all of its inventory stored within that. So you can mass store those rock bags that way. Now there is an upgraded version called the durable rock bag. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, but you do have to move up to durable twine. But with that, I know it's about wrapping up point for this first episode, just kind of getting started, covering the bare basics of Pyrotech. Next episode we'll talk about some of the more slightly advanced things, making pit kilns, starting to cook clay and blocks, moving up to the anvil, and kind of starting to work towards some of the more manual machines, things like the compacting bin. We'll talk about that come next episode. I hope you guys enjoyed this first episode, this basics of Pyrotech, and I hope you found it helpful. If you haven't checked out the mod before, it's a lot of fun, and I do highly suggest it. It's pretty much one of the keystone mods for Tales, and is used throughout the pack. So I did want to do a tutorial in-depth look at Pyrotech for you guys. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. If you did, as always, be sure and hit that like button and go ahead and subscribe if you're not already to stay updated with when new videos come out. And I hope to see you guys next time. So until then, as always, do take care, stay safe. I'll see you guys then.